If this dog bites me, I swear I'm suing the entire shelter. That's what I said the moment I locked eyes with the one dog nobody wanted, the one with the cloudy eye, the crooked tail, and a brass tag that read, "If you're reading this, I was loved once." I didn't know it then, but that scruffy old mutt was about to rescue me in ways I never expected. If this dog bites me, I swear I'm suing the entire shelter. The words slipped out before I could catch them. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but fear has a funny way of finding its voice when you least expect it. I stood frozen in front of kennel number 19, arms stiff at my sides, trying to look braver than I felt. From the corner of the hallway, Marta, the janitor, paused mid-sweep and raised an eyebrow at me, unimpressed. She was a wiry woman with silver streaks in her bun and eyes that had seen far too much. "He's not going to bite," she said plainly. "He's just different. Different." That word hung in the air like dust caught in sunlight. I knew what that meant. I'd volunteered in enough shelters over the years to understand shelter speak. Different was the polite euphemism for "nobody wants him," or worse, we stopped trying to explain. I took a cautious step closer to the kennel, peering through the bars. Inside, the dog didn't bark, didn't snarl, didn't even flinch. He simply stared, motionless as a statue. His coat was a chaotic mess of grays and browns, long tufts curling around his ears like wild, untamed thoughts. Patches were missing along his sides, revealing tired, weathered skin beneath. One eye, milky and clouded with age, bore the dull haze of time. The other was sharp, unnervingly sharp, burning gold like sunlight through amber. And yet, in that lone golden eye, there was no menace. There was something else. Not fear, not hate, maybe, just maybe, curiosity. I knelt slowly, careful not to spook him. "What's his name?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Marta resumed her sweeping. "Tag says Leo. Came in like that. No chip, no papers, just the name. Leo. It didn't suit him. He looked more like a bear. Or maybe a Samson, something ancient and strong, burdened with silence. But names were not what I was there for. I had come because, after 2 years of aching emptiness and tiptoeing past the dog food aisle at the grocery store, I'd finally told my brother I was ready to adopt again. 2 years since Max died. My golden retriever. My best friend. I hadn't touched a leash since. I crouched beside the gate. "Hey, Leo," I murmured as gently as I could. No reaction, no tail twitch, no ear perk, no hopeful glance. Just that gaze, heavy and still. "I'll give you a moment," Marta said behind me, the clack of her mop echoing down the corridor as she disappeared around the corner. I stayed, barely breathing, letting the silence settle between us. Leo tilted his head ever so slightly, and that's when I noticed it. His collar. The tag wasn't standard issue, not the shiny aluminum kind shelters hand out. It was round brass, dulled with time and wear, like something from another life. I leaned in, squinting. The light was bad, the lettering worn thin. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. The flashlight flickered on, casting a narrow beam onto the tag. And there it was, etched in the kind of careful, trembling script that someone writes when they know they won't get a second chance. "If you're reading this, I was loved once." The air caught in my throat, my vision blurred. For a moment, the world slowed. The barking from the other kennels faded into a low hum. It was just me and him and that message, a whisper from a ghost of a home he once had, a reminder that someone, somewhere, had loved him enough to leave behind a truth that couldn't be erased. I reached for the latch. "Come on, Leo," I said, my voice cracked and low. "Let's get you out of here." Still, he didn't move, but something shifted. His ears twitched barely. His eye blinked, slow and deliberate, a breath longer than the last. Marta returned, keys jingling in her hand. "You sure?" she asked, one hand resting on her hip. I nodded, my eyes never leaving Leo's. Yeah, I said softly. He's the one. She opened the kennel. The door gave a soft, metallic groan, swinging open like a quiet invitation to a world that had long forgotten him. Leo didn't bolt. He didn't tremble or flinch. He stood, slowly, deliberately, as though testing the memory of his own limbs. His joints creaked with the kind of stiffness that didn't just come from age, but from waiting too long in one place. His paws stepped forward with the weight of time, not fear. The hallway, moments ago echoing with restless barking and claws on concrete, had fallen into an uncanny hush. Even the other dogs seemed to know something was happening, something solemn, something sacred. Leo came to a stop beside me, tall and still, like a monument. He didn't look up, didn't whine or pant. He just stood there, his fur brushing the leg of my jeans, as if anchoring himself to this fragile new beginning. I knelt slowly, not wanting to startle him, and reached out. My hand hovered for a second over his head, asking, not taking. Then gently I lowered my palm onto his head. His fur was coarse in some places, soft in others, like the aftermath of battles fought alone. He didn't pull away. Instead, a quiet moment passed between us, quiet but thunderous. His tail gave the faintest wag, barely more than a breath of movement. It brushed my ankle once like a whisper that said, "Okay." Outside, the winter sunlight cut across the pavement in cold, sharp lines. It wasn't the kind of warmth that invited you to stay. It was the kind that made you keep moving, just to stay alive. I walked ahead, the leash trailing in my hand, unnecessary. Leo followed, not because he was told, but because he chose to. We reached the truck. I opened the passenger door and stepped aside. "Up you go," I said, tapping the seat gently. Leo looked at it, then back at me. His one good eye studied me, not confused, not hesitant, just watching as though weighing my heart in his mind. I smiled, almost laughing at how natural it felt. "You're not heavy," I told him. "I've carried heavier hearts." Something in him softened, and without another pause he climbed in. One paw, then the next, slow and sure. He didn't test the seat, didn't sniff around. He curled into a ball like he had done this 100 times before, in a different truck, with someone else's scent in the upholstery, years ago. Maybe in another life. I shut the door gently and circled around to the driver's side. As I sat behind the wheel, I glanced over. He was already asleep, not fully, but close. Eyes half closed, head resting on his front paws, his breath slow and steady. Trust, given not because it was earned, but because it was needed. I sat there for a moment with my hand on the key, unsure why I wasn't starting the engine. Maybe I just didn't want to break whatever spell had settled over us. Maybe I just needed to breathe, too. In the rearview mirror, the shelter stood quiet and gray behind us. Another life left behind. I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, and Leo didn't stir. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the road, and for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel alone in the driver's seat. At home, Leo moved with the kind of grace that didn't come from confidence, but from caution. He didn't rush to explore, didn't leap on furniture or chase invisible things. He walked slow laps around the living room, sniffing the baseboards, the rugs, the place's memories tend to settle. Then he found it. Max's old bed. It had sat untouched for 2 years. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it, but I hadn't let myself hope it would be used again either. "You can have it," I told him softly, as if the bed had a soul that needed permission. Kept it clean. Leo didn't hesitate. He circled once, twice, then lay down with the kind of exhausted exhale that comes from more than just tired muscles. It was a sound like surrender, a sigh from somewhere deep inside him, like he was finally letting go of something he'd been holding for far too long. That night, He didn't make a sound, not a whimper, not a rustle. He just slept, still as a shadow, curled in the corner of the room like he'd always been there. In the morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, painting golden rectangles on the floor. I made eggs and toast without thinking. Muscle memory from years ago when Max would sit behind me, hopeful and drooling. But Leo was different. He sat near the kitchen door, posture regal, eyes steady on me but not begging, just watching, like he was memorizing me. "You're a polite one," I said, offering him a piece of toast anyway. He didn't take it from my hand, just waited until I set it down, then walked over and gently picked it up with a careful mouth. Each day after that followed a quiet rhythm. Leo moved with me like a shadow. He waited outside the bathroom door every morning, sat beside the couch when I read, walked beside me on the leash like he'd been trained by monks. He never pulled, never barked at other dogs, never chased a single squirrel. Just walked beside me, matching my pace, his silence more comforting than any bark could have been. One morning I decided it was time for a proper bath. The grime came off in layers, revealing something I hadn't expected, a coat of gold, streaked with white like rivers through a desert. Beneath the dust and shelter filth was a dog who had once shone, a dog who had been brushed, maybe even pampered. Someone had loved him deeply once. You could see it in the softness of his ears, the way his eyes watched mine. Not for instruction, but for emotion. "Still not a Leo," I muttered as I towel-dried him. "You look like a king, not a lion. A king." He leaned into my hands a little, a rare gesture, his version of a thank you. The vet guessed he was 10, maybe older. His teeth were worn, his gait a little stiff. But his heart, she said it was strong, stronger than she expected. "He's been through a lot," she said, scribbling notes on a chart. "But he's healthy as an old mutt can be." He sat beside the exam table the whole time, unbothered, unshaken, like this wasn't his first rodeo, like he had been poked and prodded before and had learned not to resist what couldn't be changed. And still, he hadn't barked, not once, not at the doorbell, not at the neighbor's dog, not at anything. It was as though his voice had been packed away in a box and buried somewhere he couldn't reach. But I didn't push him. I'd known grief long enough to understand that silence wasn't absence. Sometimes it was protection. Sometimes it was healing. And maybe, just maybe, it was waiting. Waiting for the right moment to be heard again. One night, while searching through a dusty storage bin in the hallway closet, I came across Max's old toy box. It was tucked beneath a pile of blankets I hadn't unfolded in years. The lid creaked as I opened it, and the familiar scent of worn-out rubber and old rope hit me like a wave of memory. Inside was a tattered frisbee, a chewed-up plush squirrel, and, buried at the bottom, a faded green tennis ball. I held it in my hand for a moment, thumb tracing the fuzz worn thin by teeth and time. It felt like holding a piece of the past, soft and fragile, but still intact. Leo was lying nearby, watching me with that quiet curiosity of his. I smiled. Without a word, I rolled the ball across the hardwood floor. It thumped gently against the far wall and settled with a lazy spin. Leo didn't jump up, didn't chase. He simply rose to his feet, walked over with measured steps, and nudged the ball back with his nose. I laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, the kind I hadn't let myself feel in a long time, and Leo wagged his tail. Not wildly, just once, but it was enough, like a bridge had been crossed, even if just by a single step. After that, the house felt warmer, not physically, but in the way that memories stop hurting and start comforting instead. We began taking walks to the park nearby. At first, Leo stayed close, quiet and observant, but soon he grew curious. He sniffed the benches, watched the joggers, listened to the world like he was memorizing it all over again. Then came the day with the little boy. It was late afternoon, the sky painted in sleepy golds and pinks, and the park was full of children. One of them, a toddler in overalls, his cheeks sticky with sugar, was holding an ice cream cone too large for his hands. I saw it before it happened. The stumble, the fall, the scoop of ice cream splattered like a white lily on the pavement. The child sat there, stunned, lower lip trembling before it all unraveled into tears. His mother reached for him, fumbling for napkins and kind words. But Leo moved first. He walked slowly over, stopping a few feet from the boy. He sat, tall and gentle, and without making a sound, he leaned down and gave the spilled ice cream a soft, deliberate lick. Just one. The child stopped crying mid-sob. He looked at Leo with wide, confused eyes, and then he giggled. His mom let out a breath she'd clearly been holding and smiled. He's got good manners. I stood a few feet away, hand still on the leash, watching this quiet act of kindness unfold. He's got a good heart, I said. That night, back at home, Leo curled up at the foot of the couch, his breathing steady and slow. The lamp cast a warm light across the room, and for a moment everything felt still, whole. I reached over to the coffee table where I had placed the brass tag. I picked it up and turned it over in my fingers again, the edges smooth now from all the times I'd handled it. If you're reading this, I was loved once. I read it again, as if it were the first time. Then I leaned down, eyes on Leo, and whispered, "You still are." He didn't move, didn't open his eyes. But he rested his head gently on my foot, warm, heavy, familiar. And I knew what he was saying without a single sound. He believed me. The next morning, the sunlight came in soft and golden, spilling across the kitchen floor like a quiet blessing. Leo sat beside me as I sipped my coffee, his head resting gently against my leg. He didn't ask for anything. He never did. But somehow, every morning, he reminded me that presence was sometimes the greatest gift of all. I reached for my phone, opened my contacts, and called the shelter. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered, "Marta." "Morning," she said, her tone laced with surprise. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," I replied, watching Leo blink slow and contented at my feet. "I wanted to make a donation, but not just money. I want to cover the adoption fees for 3 senior dogs." There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause where silence stretches into emotion. "3?" she asked gently. "In honor of Leo," I said, "because someone once loved him enough to leave that message on his tag, and now it's my turn to carry that love forward." The pause deepened, more tender now. "You know," Marta said after a breath, "we just got a 12-year-old beagle in yesterday. No name, no tag, just wandered up to someone's porch and lay down like he was done searching." I could almost see him, gray around the muzzle, eyes dull with time and disappointment. A heart still beating but growing quieter by the day. "No one's called about him," she continued. "No chip, no collar. He just showed up." I looked down at Leo, who lifted his head and gave me a look that felt like understanding. "You think someone like you will come for him too?" Marta asked, her voice a mixture of hope and hesitation. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "I hope so," I said softly. "I really do." There was a quiet sniffle on the other end. Marta cleared her throat and thanked me, then promised the donation would go straight to those who needed it most. After I hung up, I sat there in silence for a while. Leo stood, stretched, and walked over to the window, his silhouette framed by the morning light. He looked out, not barking, not whining, just watching, waiting. Sometimes I wondered what he saw out there. A memory? A ghost? The echo of a voice he once loved? Maybe none of those things. Maybe he was just standing guard for something bigger than himself, something like hope. And maybe, just maybe, Love wasn't something that ended. Maybe it was something that moved from one heart to the next, from one broken dog to another, from grief into grace. And Leo? He wasn't just my rescue. He was the reminder that even after the silence, someone always comes.